Welcome. So good to be with you on this Wednesday as we get together for a little midweek Bible study and devotional time. So glad you've taken some time out of your day, out of your week to join us to dive into God's word and hopefully be uplifted and encouraged and maybe even a little bit challenged by what he has to say to us. Someone once said, and I think it was a pretty wise person who said it, no pun intended. Well, I guess pun intended, yes, here. But they said a smart person learns from their own mistakes, a truly wise person learns from the mistakes of others. And I think those really are some truly wise words. I wish I would have heeded them a lot more in my life. And man, I don't even know if I'm a smart person half the time because I don't learn from my own mistakes a lot of the times. But that's what we'd like to do, right? Not just learn from our own mistakes, but not have to make those mistakes, and hopefully to learn from the mistakes of others. Which is why I think sometimes the best examples perhaps aren't the ones that we should follow, but they're the ones that show us which way not to go, right? And you see examples of this all the time, right? You watch someone who handles a situation the wrong way, or they go down a certain path, and it kind of sets the example for you. Okay, here's what not to do. Here's the steps to not to take, and kind of can show you what matters, from the negative side of it, right? And I think that's in some ways what John does in First John chapter 3. So he starts off this little section in verses 11 through 18. And he says, okay, here's the message that you've heard from the beginning. And the message, we've talked a lot about what John says. I've told you a lot about what it means to follow Jesus, what God is like, what's at the core of who he is. And part of that, John says, is this: the message you've heard from the beginning includes this, that we should love one another. Now, you think that John, after he says that, would then go on to define, okay, here's what love looks like. Well, actually, first, though, he points to what love doesn't look like, right? That negative example I just alluded to. And in particular, he points us all the way back to Genesis, to all the way back to Adam and Eve and their son Cain, one of the first human beings, who shows us what happens when a heart moves in the wrong direction from what God would have us do. And of course, we read in the early pages of Genesis the story of Cain and Abel, and Cain, of course, kills his brother. And I won't go through the whole story, but part of the idea is that Cain's actions didn't just happen in a moment, right? They grew out of something that was going on inside of Cain: jealousy, resentment, anger, hatred, all welling up inside of him that eventually showed up in him taking action, right? His feelings and emotions became actions and resulted in him taking his brother's life and killing his brother. And John's point is I think pretty simple, right? What's happening inside of us eventually is going to come out in how we live. And so when John talks about love, he's not talking about something abstract. He's talking about something that truly shows up in how we operate and in our day-to-day lives. He says we know that we've passed from death to life because we love one another. It's not just something we talk about, right? But it actually is evidenced in how we treat those around us. Love becomes evidence that something real has changed in our hearts and in our lives. And then John, of course, gives us the model. He says, this is how we know what real love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. And what better model could there be, right, than Jesus? And that's what makes Christian love different. A lot of people talk about love. Pretty much everybody would agree that love is a good thing. But we have a model that establishes what true love truly is, and that model is Jesus. And specifically, in that he laid down his life for us. He didn't stay in heaven, he didn't talk about love. No, he actually came down and showed his love by laying his life down for us on the cross. That's love, right? It's not just sentimental. It's not just mere emotions or feelings. No, love involves sacrifice. Love costs something, right? It cost Jesus his life. And John then brings that to our lives. He says, and we ought to. So this is what Jesus did for us. He modeled this, he showed this, he gave his life for us, and we also ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. And John's not just talking about, like, there's very few of us, if any of us maybe listening to me right now, who will actually have the chance to lay down physically and give our lives for another human being. But what John's talking about is this daily posture of dying to ourselves and laying down our lives, giving up maybe our wants and our rights so that we might show love and give love and be an example of love to others. We are dying to ourselves so that we can give to others. We're allowing love to show up in real, practical ways. That's why John closes this whole section by saying these words in verse 18. He says, "Dear children, let us not love with words or speech." Now, he's not saying that words or speech don't matter. There's other verses in the Bible that talk about how our words and our speech matter. But John's point is to say our love goes beyond mere words and mere speech. He says, not let us not just love with words or speech. That's not where love ends. Love ends with action and in truth. Because real love isn't just words, it's actions. It's visible. It takes shape in how we live and what we do. So let's not just settle for talking about love. John says, let's step into it. Let's live it. And let's allow the love of Christ to take shape in us as we love others like he has loved us with actions and in truth. Hope you have a blessed day. God bless.